If I had my way, everything would be so nice. This world would be like Paris. No, it would be a paradise. No one would ever have to say, I'm gonna get my wish someday. All one would have to do is say, this is my order, if you may. Welcome to another episode of The School Without Walls. I'm Antonio Hobbs, host and founder of this educational program. We are pre-recorded. We're preparing for the Black History Month, which is February. The date is January the 8th, 2014. Before I introduce my guests, I have some remarks I'd like to make. I'd like to send a shout out to several persons who are avid supporters. That is Mr. Calvin Booker, who is the president of the University of Arkansas Alumni Association. And of course, Mr. Booker is working hard, figuratively speaking, day and night to try to get us to work with him to recruit at least 2,000 more students starting in September for this university. So everybody out there in the sounds of my voice, I would like for you to try to get at least one student to enter the University of Arkansas starting in September. We need more students here. I also like to acknowledge Reverend Johnny Smith, pastor of Shallow Missionary Baptist Church, who has worked so diligently with me and those 15 or 16 preachers that are working with him to help me to satisfy my passion, which is mentoring and the training of the African American male. That's my passion, and they are working with me. My guest today is Reverend James M. Lamb, who is an author. This is his third book we're going to discuss today. The first book that he authored is The Power to Change. I believe that's right, isn't it, Reverend?
That's correct, sir.
And then we have the Revolution of Power.
The Revelation.
The Revelation of Power. I wrote this sort of early, and this book right here is the title of this book is Black, and of course he has a copy right here. So what we're going to do today, Reverend Lamb, is talk about this book. I also want to talk a little bit about this one too. You familiar with this book, right?
Yes, sir. You wrote that.
Yeah,
book.
I'm the author of this book, so I said, well, I won't call it robbery to also promote my book too. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the book Black. What happened? You titled it Black. What was behind that?
Well, actually, the title was chosen because we call ourselves, or the metaphor that's used for African American people or the descendants of Africans, is the word black. And that word in the English language, in almost any connotation, the word black is used in a very negative way. And as a result, we incorporate that into our subconscious without even knowing it while we're in school. And since there are so many negative connotations to that word, we wind up not knowing why we dislike ourselves. So I chose that particular word, and I do a lot of exploration in terms of understanding psychologically what that word means in our community, what it's done, and why it's so very important to realize that black is a very proud word that we should embrace.
It goes back to Kemet, does it not?
Yes.
Kemet in early Egypt, right? Early Africa. Excellent. Just to give examples of that, I remember the black cat. You know, this old saying in Western culture, black cat is a sign of bad luck, right?
Yes, sir.
If you blackballed,
Yes, sir.
That's negative, right?
Yes, sir.
That's what you're referring to. You think of any other of those little statements that's a part of Western culture? Blackout.
Black eye.
Black eye and all. He got a black eye. So I see your point. I think it's very important for the young African Americans to understand what we were talking about. I've reached the conclusion that that's where the change will come with the young people. Once you look at history, very little change has ever come with any people that passed 40 years old. they're pretty well set in that way. It's the youth that are the revolutionaries. Okay, now I have looked into the book, and I have certain parts we're going to talk about. I read the table of contents. It's an excellent piece of work, but we can't do the whole book even in a whole day, can we?
No, sir.
So what we'll do, let's start with page 286, where you speak of the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, Kemet. Egypt says, and then you have a colon, and before Abraham, I am. What is it you were saying there? First with Kemet, what in the world is the significance of the word Kemet? What does the young folks need to know about that word?
Well, the word Kemet is the original name for Egypt. The name of Kemet was changed to Egypt by the Greeks. Mm-hmm. And it has a great deal of significance because that word is indicated by a hieroglyphic sign of a burnt piece of wood. Mm-hmm. And it indicates the black land and black people. And
burnt wood would be black, right?
Absolutely
burnt wood
black.
It turns black, okay. Mm-hmm. Whereas I have read some contemporary European scholars that claim that Kemet does mean black, and of course they were referring to that fertile black soil in Egypt, which I've had the privilege to visit Egypt, and the soil is just as black as it can be. And the plants that come out of the soil are almost blue dark, it's so green. But that is not the whole truth, is it?
Absolutely not. Egyptians or Kemites depicted themselves as a people of color, of the black race.
Right.
The Greeks, who were eyewitnesses to their association with the Egyptians, said that they were black, very dark, and had curly hair. Mm-hmm. So you can look this up and rest assured that there's a foundation for the historical fact that these people were black.
Well, we have about 1 minute before this break, and when we come back after the break, let us continue talking about Egypt in relation to Kemet, and of course you also have here before Abraham, I am. And I also want to mention after the break is the importance of us studying black history. Why is that important? We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Hi everyone, I'm Eric Spoelstra of the Miami Heat and a member of the NBA Fit team. I'm here today at the White House to find out why eating healthy can help you perform like a champion.
Well, I eat fruits and vegetables every day because it gives me the energy I need to perform at the top of my game.
Thanks, Dwayne. What about you, Ray?
Drinking water is an important part of my pregame routine so I can stay focused and refreshed. And you can take it from me, eating the right foods can help make you a better athlete.
Oh! Angel!
Pretty good, huh?
Mm-hmm.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
Those of you who just joined us, I'm Antonio Hobbs, host of this educational program called The School Without Walls. My guest is an author and friend, the Reverend James M. Lamb, author of the latest book is called Black. Reverend Lamb, on the other side of the break, we were talking about Kemet. We had pretty well wrapped that up about Kemet, but if there's anything else you want to say about that, feel free to do so. But I want to mention this to the general public before we get into that, something that I should have said earlier. We're going to talk, this is a series of four episodes. I've done one already, this is the third one. So for the month of February, we will have 4 separate episodes talking about African American history and culture. And we want to move from February to the whole year, so we're encouraging our people to realize the importance of history, and we're going to talk about that in this particular episode, about the importance. And what I want to say, as we get into this history and start revealing truth, I don't want people to think we are talking hate talk when we start uncovering truth that happened in Western culture. See, I've heard people say that's hate talk when you talk about how destructive slavery has been. It was a very destructive institution. And we want all the young people, black or white, to understand that and how damaging it has been on the African American community. And we got to learn to live together in the future. So I think knowing these things should help us to better live together. Okay, back to where we were. You had other things you want to say about Kemet, the subject of Before America I Am, Egypt, Kemet, whatever you have there you'd like to share with us, go right ahead.
Well, the ancient Egyptians were very organized. These people often communicated by letter in their daily existence. They had the idea that what is not written down or documented does not exist. And they have communications, papyri, they have records that you can trace back for thousands of years. And Egypt was, or Kemet, was a nation that was in existence for thousands of years. And for the pyramid building age and the temple building age, there were no outside invaders during that time of the building of those pyramids. Although you may have heard stories about Israelis or Hebrews helping them build the pyramids. That's impossible due to the time frame. They couldn't be the so-called Hyksos who invaded later. And actually what happened when I chose the title before Abraham, I am speaking of Egypt and speaking of Kemet, is because these 70 people came down into the most sophisticated nation that had ever existed. These people were a handful of Hebrews who lived there for 215 years, and they allegedly came to a growth point of 3 million people. That would have to average 66 children per female. That's rather extraordinary to grow from 70 people to that number that was supposed to have left all of a sudden. And the reason why I talk about how great Kemet was now, the architecture and the science and the knowledge of architecture, is because you have 70 people who come down into the most sophisticated nation that's ever existed on the face of the earth at that time, and all of a sudden Abraham becomes our father. I mean, you have another group of people writing for the benefit of themselves and writing in disparaging terms to the very people who taught them, to the very people who gave them the information. One of the things about the quest for knowledge, which was the original genesis and the reason why I began to research this book, was I found out so many fascinating and powerful things about black history that you don't get in school, that it's rather extraordinary. And when you look at the accomplishments of Egypt and Kemet in the face of another group of people who allegedly migrated there, well, it's astounding that now we actually go around thinking Abraham is our personal father. Rather than Amenhotep or some of the other great pharaohs or great leaders of that time. So that's why you have the title Before Abraham I Am, speaking of Kemet.
Let me comment a bit on what you said. That goes back to the lack of the proper knowledge, right? That's another reason that we need to know the true history. I think when you mentioned the 70 people, those who are students of the Bible would understand more readily that you meant Abraham and his family that came into Egypt, the story about Joseph, right?
Yes.
Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, and then later on his family came in due to the fact that there was a famine in the land. Of course, I believe your book states this too. There's no recorded history to substantiate that portion of the Bible, is there?
No.
That they actually came and lived in Egypt. I don't know.
The characters of the Bible in the Old Testament, Moses, Joseph, they're exclusive to that writing. There's absolutely no history of in Egyptian writing, Kemet writing, or on the walls, or any documentation whatsoever that they ever entered at any point into the land of Kemet.
That is really something to think about when all Christendom is taught that Joseph came down and saved Egypt, right?
That's
Joseph
correct.
was the one who came down, the young Hebrew boy, quote, came down and he he was interpreting the dream of the Pharaoh and he saved him and so forth, became second in the land. And inasmuch as the Egyptians truly believe in recording history, it is something to think about. It might cause one to think that was the Hebrew story or somebody else's story, right?
That's correct.
Okay. It's about break time, the second break. We have one more minute. So we have about a minute now, and you may say whatever else you want to say about before Abraham I am, but I think you made it pretty clear. You're saying that the Abraham of the Bible, before he existed, that was about 1,000 years of African American culture that existed, and pretty well the foundation of whatever we enjoy today, like agriculture, science, mathematics, medicine, architecture, and did I leave out anything? The basic fives of the world was established there, and plus peace. Basic peace existed for
Peace.
about
There were no prisons.
Yeah, about 1,000 years. Yeah.
Over 1,000 years of existence in a civilized fashion. You had a normal way of interacting in the community, which goes against the image and portrayal of Africans as some type of savage that had to be civilized,
Subhuman.
that had to be subhuman, and had to be taught. The more information that I found, and actually this book is jam-packed with information. One of the things that I hear from people who read this book is that they're astounded at the amount of information that gives them a clear view of how great we are. One of the things about history that most people don't know is anytime another culture takes over, they destroy the culture before them psychologically. They take over their gods, they make their gods demons, they make their gods the god,
Right.
and then they either take from the previous countries that they've conquered, or they institute their own ideas and supersede the ideas that preceded them.
That is so true. I think the second part of this episode is ended. We'll be back in just a few minutes after the break to continue this conversation.
Hey everybody! Heart disease affects 1 in every 3 women in America, but you can fight back. There's no time to lose. Mothers, sisters, daughters, families, and friends, it's time to shout louder, stand stronger, and demand change. Let's go!
To the Batmobile. Dang it.
To the invisible jet! Dang it. Together, we can put an end to heart disease. It's time to go red for women. I could use your help. Yeah! Learn more from the American Heart Association at www.goredforwomen.org.
Hi, my name is Danny Andre Burrell II, a senior here majoring in industrial technology, management, and applied engineering. I thought that I would be looking for a job at this point, but thanks to my mentor, Dr. Charles Colin at Career Services, I was able to obtain a position as an industrial engineer upon graduation.
Danny worked hard in class from the beginning, obtaining 3 internships while on campus. UAPB can help prepare students like Danny for those same opportunities.
UAPB prepared me.
What's up, this is Swiss Beats. Do you know that 1,000 people ages 13 to 24 are infected with HIV every month in the US? As African Americans, HIV hits us harder than any other racial group. We account for over 44% of all new HIV infections in the US. You can't tell by looking at somebody if they're infected. Do you know your status? Visit Act Against AIDS to find out where you can get tested for free.
Those of you who've just joined us, I'm Antonio Hobbs, host and founder of this educational program. I was told during the break that I might have made an error in speech when I was referring to the ancient Africans. I might have said the ancient African Americans. If so, that was just an error. That was about 1,000 years of peace and prosperity prior to the person Abraham that we find in the Bible, of Africans in the place called Kemet by them, later called Egypt by the Greeks. Reverend Lamb, I notice here in your book you have on page 331 the name of God. Why is that significant? We call the Creator God. Some people call him Allah. Some call him Jehovah. What is the significance of the name of God?
Well, because names of God have changed over time, depending on who or what culture is the dominant culture. That becomes the name of God. Even the word God is a German word. When the Visigoths overran the Roman Empire, and they were still using the word theos for God.
Theos.
Theos. That's a Greek word for God. When they overran the Roman government, the word God came in vogue. So, but we still go to theological seminary.
Right.
Before that, you had the Jewish name of Yahweh, Jehovah. Before that, they used words like Adonai or El. We use the word Jehovah or El Shaddai or El Elyon. All of these different names and depictions for God. God is not Jewish. And so it's just the people who subscribe to the idea about a God that give him the name, the contemporary name. So when people talk about this one particular name that is the only key for you to get into heaven, well, actually that name itself has changed over time. It's not actually the name of Jesus, it's the name of Yeshua.
Yeshua, right. That was a Hebrew word for
Yes.
Jesus, right?
Yes, Jesus is an English word that developed over years, and before the 15th century, I believe, there was no J. So to hold somebody to the idea that you can't get into heaven without utilizing the name of Jesus is just, it's scripturally and historically unfounded.
That is amazing. I've heard some people say that the word G-O-D, capital G-O-D, God, as we use it, is a title too. It's not the name of anybody, it's a title. You ever heard that? God, the word G-O-D,
Yes.
whereas Yahweh is a noun, the name of something, whereas God is more or less like a title, like Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir is just a title to Walter Raleigh. You see what I'm saying? But somewhere in Christendom, we use the word God. We've always done that, haven't we? We haven't used it traditionally. I think in the recent decades, I've heard them say Yahweh and Jehovah. But I can remember when there wasn't any Jehovah used in Christendom. Do you remember that?
No, sir.
Everybody was saying God. They weren't saying Jehovah. You know, like if you go to church, they didn't mention Jehovah when you were small. It'd be God, right?
Well, if they were talking about the New Testament, predominantly they used the word God, but every now and then there would be a reference to Jehovah.
In your church experience?
Well, in the Baptist, not so much in the Baptist experience. In the holiness tradition, Church of God in Christ, you find that use of Jehovah. There are even a lot of songs that have been created about that, the use of that word for God.
Another thing, when you mentioned Jesus, did not the Old Testament mention that his name would be
Emmanuel?
Emmanuel, which is not Jesus. You ever thought about that? Why did he move to Jesus rather than the Christ? See, the Christ is Emmanuel translated, but we more or less say Jesus rather than the Christ. I seldom hear a person say Christ. They say Jesus, which is a common name among the Latin people.
Well, to go back to the original Kemetic idea of developing oneself to the point of recognizing the divinity in you, there has always been throughout various cultures an idea of Christ rising or the Christ rising in a person. And even a lot of Paul's writings indicate the Christ in you. The Christ is a title. It means the anointed one. So anyone can become a son of God and be anointed. I am the son of God. If I'm not the son of God, then who am I? But people think if you say something like that, well, it's blasphemous. But that's the word that I prefer, which indicates there's some kind of activity in you becoming more godlike.
Excellent observation. Excellent observation. Okay, if you want to move on, anything else you want to say on the name of God before we move to, let's see.
Well, it's just interesting that almost every culture has a name for God except African Americans. And that's just the extent to which our history has been wiped out, and we have an entire new culture. When you look at our original cultures in Africa and you see how it was community, it was respect, it was people got along, it was families, you didn't have runaway teenagers, you didn't have prisons. When you look at that compared to what the image that's projected of us, why it gives you a whole new idea of who you are. It gives you a whole new idea historically. And if you don't have historical information to go along with your biblical information, if that's the source of your history, then you can't see history correctly.
You don't have balance there, do you?
Absolutely
We have
not.
about a minute and a half now. I want to ask you a question. Why is it that you think all civilizations teach their history? It's very significant. All civilizations teach their history. However, we as African Americans have not received our history, but that's not the question. Why is it so important for anybody to know their history?
So you know your roots, you know who you are, you know where you come from, and it's the same reason we go to school and we're taught by the dominant society their history. We're taught their history so we can look up to them, admire them and their accomplishments, and we're not taught our history. There's very little African history that's taught, and if it is, for example, the other day on the History Channel they were showing about cultures and different nations that had come to America before Columbus. They mentioned the Vikings and several others. Didn't mention Africans once. And in my book I have several indicators and several proofs that Africans had come to North and South America and interacted with the Indians and the South Americans long before Columbus got here. There was no mention of any blacks. And this is, in my bibliography, I cite about 7 books that I got that material from noted scholars of the day. Yet you will not hear that on the History Channel.
Well, let's stop on that, and we will continue in the next episode. This is the second episode talking about the ancient history of Africa and Africans. We're going to continue with not doctor, but Reverend James Lamb in episode 2. Actually, with Reverend Lamb, it's episode 2, but it's episode 3 in history. Be back in just a few minutes to continue with Reverend Lamb. Okay, sir?